guys. So I'm going to talk with you first a little bit about my road to publication and what that looked like. I'm also going to talk to you about traditional publication, traditional publishing deals, and what those really look like, and hopefully pull away some of the mystery of some of those things. And we can even talk a little bit about independent publishing or self-publishing versus what traditional publishing looks like, okay? So to start off with me, I am a professional writer. I write as a journalist for publication every day. My boss would probably like me to write a little bit more every day for publication. I started writing and pursuing, pursuing a novel during the pandemic. I had time, probably like a lot of folks had time, right? I had time and I wrote 2 books in the pandemic, sold them both to Shotgun Honey. And I will also say one of those books, Magic City Blues, I actually sold twice. I sold it the first time to a British publisher who did some things that I did not think were ethical, and I pulled the book from them and then ended up reselling it to Shotgun Honey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my road to publication. My road to publication looks weird, and almost everybody's will look weird. Nobody's looks the same, all right? There are some mile markers, some mileposts that you'll see in your road to publication that everybody goes through, but the way to get there is different, okay? I had always wanted to write, and I had always wanted to, quote unquote, be a writer. I think that most people go through a time in their lives when they would rather talk about writing, or they would rather want to be a writer than to actually write, if that makes sense. And I got stuck in that rut for a long time, right? I knew that I was a pretty good writer, and I knew that I could write very cleanly, very quickly, and so I didn't approach it in the way that I probably should have, in the way that I should have approached it as a professional trying to get published, all right? This will be my first word of advice to you. If you are writing to be published, if you are writing to go for a traditional publishing deal, you have to be professional in the way that you approach your work. What's that look like? For me, it was getting up at 5 a.m. and writing for an hour every day until the manuscript was finished. Getting that kind of professional discipline, like you're in your day job. Some of you may be retired, but when you were working your day job, if you didn't show up for a few days, you might not have a job to go to again, right? That's kind of what fiction and writing a book ends up being like, right? If you're in the middle of a manuscript and you take a week out of it, you take a week off from it, the manuscript may not be there when you come back. And what I mean by that, I mean the words that you wrote will be there, but it will be extremely hard to get back to the story, to get back to what you want, where you were, the mindset that you were in. Does that make sense? We all cool? Haley, it's lovely to see you, by the way. I'm so happy to see you here. I want you to tell your dad that I miss him. Okay? So, I got distracted. Here's the thing. You have to treat the work professionally to be professionally published. Period. End of story. Okay? Everybody that you see on a bookshelf has had to make that commitment. If you are writing romance or you're writing fantasy, so, let's say you're a big fan of Jim Butcher or someone else who writes, say, high fantasy instead of urban fantasy. They had that moment where they had to say, I have a day job that I go to. I may have a spouse. I may have children. It is important to me to write this book. or to write this short story, or to write this play or screenplay or whatever, all right? And you have to make that decision to get to the page. One of the things I can tell you that works for me, because I'm a creature of habit, as I bet all of you are, in some way or another, the way that worked for me was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, sitting down to write pre-coffee. Coffee was my reward. But I wanted 1,500 to 2,000 words every day. That was my commitment to myself. I'm not saying that you have to do that much. And I'm not telling you that you have to write every day. When you are working on a project, it is most definitely preferable, I think, to write every day until that project is finished. At least a draft of it. Treat the work professionally, all right? So when I got it in my head that, hey, I have to treat this work as professionally as I treat my everyday news writing or sports writing, all right? Things changed. Things clicked a little bit better. I could sit down and write short stories or drafts of short stories and be done with them. It's a different animal when you're talking about a book, okay? So for me, I started the first chapter of Living the Gimmick about 8 years ago, okay? I had written the first chapter of it, and I didn't know what to do with it, right? I knew that I had like an inciting incident at the end of that chapter that pushed the narrative. I didn't know where to go with that book. Did not know where to go with it at all. So last year, February 1st of last year, I sat down and read that chapter, and I don't know what brought it to me. There are things kind of that flow into your mind and they make a hilarious and weird soup, right? Where you put where things come together and things match, and things, that you didn't see before suddenly click. And part of it was, for me, growing up in South Alabama, my dad and I sat down every Saturday and we watched Southeastern Championship Wrestling from Dothan, Alabama, every Saturday, 5:30 p.m. All right? And I knew that, one of my characters was going to be a retired pro wrestler, the other was going to be a current guy who was at the end of his career and still hanging on. All right? So I knew that, but I didn't know what else was in there. And this was in the time when the Me Too movement had crested, all right? And I was listening to a song by a guy named Todd Snyder, which is You Think You Know Somebody, all right? And it clicked in my mind that if the guy who was killed needed avenging or needed his killer to be brought to justice by his best friend, which is a premise, a normal premise for any crime novel, right? An injustice has been done. The cops aren't moving fast enough. So an individual takes matters into his own hands, right? That is absolutely what they call a trope in crime fiction. Well, I started thinking about, what if the victim was maybe not the friend that the main character thought he was? What if this guy's best friend was someone that he did not realize he was? And that's where the manuscript turned. And that's when I started going, I can write this. And I got the idea for the story, and I came up with the idea of putting half of the novel in the present, half of it in the past, to try to illuminate what was going on in the present, okay? So that book came out incredibly easily after that. I wrote it in February. And by wrote it, I mean I wrote the whole thing and was done with it by the 28th. And that was, what you read there, with the exception of having gone over it and had a professional editor at the publishing house copy edit it, it was accepted with virtually no changes by the publisher, all right? So that's rare. A lot of times you're going to have editors at publishing houses who want changes, who want you to deepen the drama. But in this case, after 8 years, it was an easy birth. So, but the interesting thing there is that I think that sometimes books don't get born until their time. It was, it was time for Living the Gimmick to be born. It was time for that book to be written. And I don't think I could have written it 8 years ago. I could not have written it 5 years ago. I don't know that, and I have a really high opinion of myself. I will tell you that I think I'm a really good writer. I wasn't good enough to write it. And that's one of the things that was holding it back, right? I wasn't good enough. I wasn't prepared to treat the work professionally the way that it should be treated, okay? So, Living the Gimmick was written essentially, except for that first chapter, in a month. And then sent to the publisher, and it was accepted June 24th, actually. So, a year and a day ago. And it was accepted along with Magic City Blues. Magic City Blues is a little bit different. So Magic City Blues was going to be my debut novel. All right? I had sent this manuscript to a publishing house called Close to the Bone, which is a British publishing house. And it is the tale of a low-level thug who is assigned to protect the daughter of a Birmingham crime lord. And then it becomes, and again, that's a standard, easy crime fiction premise. In the writing, it became something else. And in the writing, it ends up dealing with a land swindle around the Caraway Hospital property in North Birmingham. So, here's the thing. That book was sent to a publisher who asked for some edits, and when I made those edits, they accepted them. And the editing process is just as professional as the writing process, as the publication process, okay? When you get edits from an editor, your job is to not look at them and go, that is my baby, and I don't want you to touch it. I grew that thing. Your job as a writer is to look at those edits and say, is this reasonable? Is this reasonable? Is this something that will strengthen the book? And you have to push away from the book a little bit and get some objectivity. All right? So we're talking about professionalism, getting your work done. We're talking about being able to look at your own work with some objectivity. Okay? So those are huge things. The publisher, and I will be just completely transparent about this, okay? Close to the Bone was actually using a person who was incarcerated for murder to do their social media marketing. And I didn't know this. This was never mentioned to me or anyone else who had signed with the publisher. Right? We were all kind of shocked when we found this out because this person who was incarcerated was harassing female book bloggers and book reviewers. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, nope, none for me, thank you. I'm actually all for rehabilitation, but for prisoners and whatnot. But for me, I'm not going to be associated with a publisher who is allowing someone who supposedly works for them to harass someone. That's just not what I want to be associated with. So I pulled the book. And then Shotgun Honey, who was already considering Living the Gimmick, said, send it to us. We like what we see. We're living the gimmick. Send it to us. I did, and they took it as part of a 2-book deal. I got both contracts on the same day. So from there, it's a lot of waiting. So living the gimmick, it took a year to come out, and actually it was sped up in production because they had an author drop out. Decided they wanted to try for a larger publishing house. So Living the Gimmick got moved up. It was supposed to be published in October. Ended up being published in May. Then Magic City Blues will be published in February 2023. One of the things I will talk with you about is building on small successes. I got these book contracts, and I had started writing short stories and getting them published in either small, medium, or large websites, anthologies, magazines, and it got me noticed. And I was able to use some of that notice to approach Down and Out Books and say, hey, I would really like to create an anthology, a charity anthology that will benefit the Equal Justice Initiative in Montgomery. All right? So we came up with Dirty South, High Crimes and Low Lives Below the Mason-Dixon Line. And it's focused, quite frankly, on giving voice to some writers who maybe don't have a voice. All right, I wanted, in our call for this, I asked for people who were BIPOC, for people who were on the LGBTQ. I want them to send us stuff, and we've had a good response for that so far. And if you have a story that you would like to send to us, get with me afterward. I'll give you the email address to send to that, because the deadline for it is not until July 30th, okay? So, that's it about me. I live in Hoover, I live in Bluff Park, and do my best to write almost every day. I'm currently writing 2 books at the same time, which is weird, but if I get tired of one, I go to the other, and then that's kind of fun. One of them is a Southern Gothic novel based on the historical incident of a hurricane that struck, Hurricane Eloise, that struck the Gulf Coast and went into Alabama and killed like 80 people back in 1976. And the other is more of a just traditional Southern crime novel like you would see from maybe Brian Panowich or Sean Cosby. I hope that I write that well. If Sean ever sees this, Sean, I know I don't yet, but I'm working on it. So let's talk about what you guys want to really hear about. Yes, sir.
I mean, when you were putting Living the Gimmick together, with the understanding you might publish it, do you sit down, if you go roll up on Parker's bedroom, one of his last novels, he's outlining around the wall.
Mm-hmm.
Did you work with the publisher, and did they say, okay, we need a 300 page, or did you, and when you sat down to write the book, did you think, okay, because when I've tried to write something, it can be remembrance of things past and go on forever. If you don't say, here is how long this needs to be, this is how the chapters need to look, this is what the package will look like. And
So I kind of had
working within that,
So I really had the idea of writing a pretty short book, and Living the Gimmick is right at 60,000 words. And the reason I wanted to write a short book is because I have such a fondness for like the old gold medal style books from the middle of the 20th century. Like that's one of the things that I kind of specialize in. I love old Donald Westlake or Vin Packer or John D. MacDonald, Lawrence Block novels that are, some of them are even shorter than 50,000 words, right? And what you get, and what I tried to do with Living the Gimmick is to make sure that every word had impact. Every word, you can read Living the Gimmick in a couple of days if you take it with you and you sit in an airport, right? And you're just reading, all right? So I tried to make sure that every word had impact, but I wanted to keep it essentially 60,000 words or below, and it came in just under 60,000 words. Okay, so let's talk about my beautiful PowerPoint here. We're going to talk about finding your way. So, this is cut off a little bit, but we'll go through here. Traditional publishing deal. What's the process look like? Boy, do I have terrible news for you. The process is long. If you are looking for a traditional Big Five, and what we're talking about Big Five, and I have them listed up here: Hachette, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, Macmillan, Penguin, Random House. It used to be the Big Six. Those presses deal exclusively with agents, and there is a process to getting an agent. And it is not one that I have mastered. I know about it because I've researched it, but it is, again, something that I've come close to, but have not quite mastered. So, to get an agent, you have to have, number one, if you are a debut author, this is your first book, you have to have, number one, a completed manuscript. Everything that you have there, all the ideas in your head, the outline. If you are writing fiction, all right, the rules are different for nonfiction. All right, if you are writing fiction, you have to have a completed manuscript. Most agents are looking for manuscripts that are 80,000 to 100,000 words long. Okay? So, you have to query an agent, and I have a couple of places later on in this PowerPoint where you can look, and we'll talk about places to go to build a query letter, okay? So the question up here is, do I have to? You do not have to query an agent. You do not have to land an agent to get your book published. However, it is necessary if you want to deal with one of the Big Five publishers, okay? I mean, there's no way around it. Query letter does a couple of things. 3 things in specific, really. It tells the project, which includes the project length, genre, if there is one, and even literary work. If you write literary stuff, literary is still a genre, okay? So you can tell them this is, this is Southern fiction, this is upmarket fiction, this is commercial fiction, this is crime, this is, XY, it's urban fantasy, whatever you are writing. Okay? The length, and so you have to tell them, what you're writing, what you're pitching to them, what the length is. And one of the things that agents like to see, hey, why are you approaching me with this project? Which is the, why should I care? You have to answer that in your query letter. Why should I care about this project that you're sending me? Okay? The other part here is you're going to want to tell them about the book, so you're going to want to give them, a very short paragraph about what the book is about, why they should care, all that stuff that we just went over, and then a little bit about yourself. What makes you the person to write this book? What makes you marketable as an author? Okay? So, I have some resources here that we'll talk about later. However, you do not have to have an agent. One of these things here, there are presses that accept queries without the professional representation of an agent. We're talking about Crooked Lane, Harlequin, Angry Robot. I want to pause at Angry Robot real quick, because if you write sci-fi and fantasy, Angry Robot is a British publisher that pays a $5,000 advance for first novels. So, if you are writing sci-fi, and this includes high fantasy, low fantasy, hard sci-fi, all right? A woman who I'm really good friends with named Cassandra Rose Clark got her start. She writes for Simon & Schuster now. She's an incredibly lyrical and beautiful writer, and she does just fantastic work, literary work, right? But she got her start with a 60,000 word novel called The Assassin's Curse, all right? And I helped her name that book, and I'm in the acknowledgments, and that was like my first break into like real book publishing, is the fact that I'm actually in the acknowledgments of that book, and it's really cool. But I want to point that out because you look at Crooked Lane advances top out, I want to say, for first-time authors at about $5,000. I know that Harlequin, if you're writing romance, they pay about $5,000 a book as an advance. Kensington differs. I think it's between, the last I saw was like $5,000 to $20,000 for a first novel. Hollis, I'm not sure, because Hollis is privately held. Hardcase is different. Hardcase, if you have ever, you may have heard of them because they, on occasion, publish some shorter Stephen King novels. Okay. Tor is famous for high fantasy. All right. Tor has an asterisk by it because they are currently closed to unagented queries. That will probably reopen, I would bet, after the turn of the year. So essentially they are open to unsolicited queries until they get too many to handle. And then they close down, right? I want to be very clear. If you don't have an agent, this is your ceiling for a traditionally published book, okay? Because editors at Big Five houses do not have the bandwidth nor the staff to handle unsolicited manuscripts now, okay? They deal with agents exclusively, all right? So let's go to the next slide. All right, we're talking now small and micro presses, all right? Without telling you my advance, because some people think it's gauche to talk about money, my advance was very small. And I got a DM from our publisher on Twitter who told me this week, hey, you're a rock star. And I said, what are you talking about? I am now the #1 author for my publisher. So it's been a really good, thank you. So my publisher's super happy with it, right? I didn't tell you guys that for that, but I'm like, look, my advances earned out, right? Everything I get from here on out is royalty money. So buy a book. No, but here are some really respected small presses, okay? University of Chicago Press. One of the reasons that I know about them, and they are not a traditional university press. They do academic books, all right? But they also did a beautiful reissue of the Richard Stark novels, crime novels. I'm friends with the guy who does publicity for University of Chicago Press, a guy named Levi Stahl, all right? And he is the reason that they brought 20 some odd books out that had been either out of print or were going out of print, because he loved those books and he wanted them back out in the world. Akashic Books, I believe, is run out of Brooklyn, New York. They do a lot of noir, they do a lot of crime, but they also take flyers on other things too. Algonquin books, next level books, down and out, intrigue, and I put intrigue up here for a specific reason. Intrigue is a micropress, and I think the biggest advance that I've heard of them giving was like $1,000. Okay? But here's the reason that I am pointing them out. My friend Sean Cosby, this guy right here, the guy that wrote Razorblade Tears, started at Intrigue, which is an ebook publisher. I don't think they do any hard copies whatsoever. And now Sean's out here with Flatiron Books backing up truckloads of money to him. You know, so, and winning every award in existence other than the Edgar Award, which he got snubbed for this year. But here's one of the reasons to go with a micro or a small press. Down and Out, so Down and Out also, you heard me mention them earlier. Down and Out is who I approached to do the charity anthology for the Equal Justice Initiative, right? They were also, at one point, until Shotgun Honey, which is my publisher, decided to break away, they were also like the masthead over Shotgun Honey books as well. So they do weird, weird crime, verging right up to horror, right? So they do all sorts of different books. They're definitely worth checking out if you think you have something that hits on crime or horror or that kind of genre. All right, let's go to the oh, and I want to make sure that you guys see this. Nonconformist Mag has a huge list of independent and small publishers to fit every genre, whether that is literary, whether that is, again, it's what I know and what I do best, it's crime, whether it's Southern memoir, autobiography, whether it is fantasy and science fiction. All of that stuff, you can find I would almost bet you that you can find a publisher for what you are trying to write here, okay? Let's go to the next slide, please. So let's talk about pluses for small publishers, micropresses. Everything's a trade-off. If you choose to pursue a deal with a smaller micro publisher, there are some significant benefits. You have shorter publishing times. For example, with a larger publisher, say you go with Flatiron, or you get signed by Flatiron, you get signed by Rock Books, or you get signed by, and these publishing houses that I'm mentioning now are like sub-publishers under the umbrella of the Big Five, okay? So you get signed to Simon & Schuster. Your book might not come out for 2 years. All right? And I'm old. I don't have that much time. So it may take longer. And when it takes longer than that, the reason that it may take longer than that, number one, if you get an agent, that's a great step toward being published. That is not a guarantee of getting published. Okay? I know several people who have landed agents who have written really good books. I'm going to, no, I'm not going to name her because she might get mad at me. I have a good friend who has an agent and who has sold and published a book that's really, really good, and it's one of the best books I've read probably in the last 5 years. It's fantastic. It did not find its audience. And so she has had trouble. She has an agent. She has 2 more books written, and her agent can't sell those books because her first book did not do well. And she doesn't want to go to a small publisher or to a micropress. And I understand that. She's already, she's already experienced the, hey, you get X number in advance from a big 5 publisher, right? So she doesn't want to go and take like $1,000 advance or a $500 advance from a small publisher, right? She wants her agent to sell her book to one of the big 5. And she can't get it published right now. She can't get either one of the 2 that she has finished right now sold in the way that she wants it sold. And it's driving her bananas. So just understand that that happens, all right? I have self-published some stuff before, all right? And I'm going to tell you that small and micro presses have a leg up on self-publishing because of this next thing. Brick and mortar stores can access your book more easily because they can return your book if it doesn't sell, all right? Returns are a part of the game in publishing. But you have more brick and mortar store access. Unlike self-publishing, small and micro publishers use Ingram Spark to distribute books into channels that self-publishing cannot reach. And you also have the ability to write niche. What do I mean about the ability to write niche? Well, maybe a pro wrestling based murder mystery that a small publisher might take a chance on, but a larger publisher is like, the heck? Why would anybody want to read that? Well, thankfully my publisher took a chance on it, and it turns out some people do want to read it. It's really great. You also have your eligibility for mainstream awards. All right, this may not interest you in the slightest, okay? If you write, say, cozy mystery where there's no blood, where it's a mystery after the fact, right? There's not violence. It's all built around the riddle in the book, all right? You could be eligible for an Agatha Award. Next year, I'll be eligible for, say, a Anthony Award, which is one of the top awards for crime and mystery fiction, all right? Next year, I'll be eligible for an Edgar Award. Not saying that I'll be a finalist. Not saying that I will win an award, because I probably won't. But the potential is there, and that matters to me. As a writer, I'd like a shelf full of awards, all right? So that, and it's, look, that's cheap and it's vain, but it's also something about my personality that I know. I want that stuff, okay? And I alluded to this earlier. You have the ability to earn out your advance sooner, okay? So what does that mean? Let's say if you go with a small or micro publisher and they give you $500 for your book, all right? And you sell 1,000 books. I guarantee you that you will, depending on what your contract says, I guarantee you that you will have earned out your advance, meaning that now the publisher owes you money, all right? Everyone dreams of the big advance for a book. Me too, all right? I would love it if somebody offered me $250,000 for a book. I would absolutely give them that book and not worry about anything for 5 years, right? So here's the thing though, it didn't happen for me. I still have a book out. I am earning royalties with every book that I sell now, right? So in 6 months, the publisher will send me a statement and direct deposit money into my bank account, matching that statement. So the downside of a big advance is this. If you don't earn out your advance, if you are like Meghan McCain and you sign a big 5 publishing deal and you sell 220 copies overall across the country and that's all you sell, all right, and that is a legit thing that happened, okay? She has the, whatever the six-figure advance is that she got, right? But she may not, depend, and this will be different for her because of her name, but the likelihood of her getting to sell another book, to write another book that a large publisher will pick up, and that a large publisher will pay six figures for, since she's nowhere close to earning that out, that's lost money for her, right? So they're not going to throw, say, another $250,000 out for another advance.
So this publisher gamble.
So, maybe. I mean, well, here's the thing. All publishing is a gamble anyway, right? So, but nobody likes to think about throwing, you know, like if you've spent $250,000 and the return wasn't there, well, you're probably not going to throw another $250,000 in there. So you also have a better royalty split, usually with a small or micro press, all right? And just in a bit of transparency, my royalty with my publisher is 50%. A royalty with a large publisher is about 8%. Okay? And that is because of a couple of things that I'm going to go over on the next slide. Like everything else, there can be downsides to going with a smaller micro press. Publicity is on you. Large presses, like the big five publishers, still have publicity arms, although they are shrinking. They have the ability to have 200,000 copy press runs, right? And to put 20 books into a store, you know, 20 books from a single author into a store. I got to do all of my own publicity, okay? So, and here are my successes. I got Barnes & Noble and Hoover to carry 2 copies. Second & Charles is carrying some copies. I'm going to go there later today for a signing at 2 o'clock. Hopefully I will sell out. I don't know, but Dee Dee's Book Rack in Trussville is carrying copies. Wild Roast here in Hoover is carrying copies. Books A Million, I'm sorry, not Books A Million, Second & Charles and Barnes & Noble down in Dothan are carrying copies of my book. Sundog Books in the Panhandle of Florida is carrying my books, and that is all because I worked on that. I didn't have a sales guy for this publisher. In one sec, I'll get there. I didn't have a sales guy, right? Going, hey, we have a new author from your area who we'd really like you to carry. Can we ship you like 10, 15 of his books? We think it'll really sell. So, like you would at, say, if I was with Penguin Random House, right? They will have somebody do that for you as opposed to me going, could you please just take a couple? Let's see if they sell. You can return them if you need to. What was your question, sir?
How many copies would you like to go to each of these books?
Honestly, what I would love for them each to carry 20. But, like...
Well, if they can return them.
Oh, if they can return them. If they can return them, then it really doesn't matter. Like, you will see... I'll give you an example, okay? You see the racks near the front of Barnes & Noble where, hey, David Baldacci's book from 2 years ago is in hardback and it's $5.99. You've seen, you know what I'm talking about? That stuff. Those are remaindered books, all right? They're trying to get rid of them to sell them, and the thing about remaindered books is those may be returns from a different store, move them to, say, Birmingham because they didn't sell in Atlanta, right? And this author has sold here X number of copies before. But we're marking the price down. Authors do not get any royalty on remaindered books. 0. So honestly, If Barnes & Noble is going to carry 2 of my books, I'm happy with that, because if they sell 2 books, they'll order 2 or 3 more.
Will they carry those books because they bought them from you, or do they have to go to
They went through my publisher.
so you can go?
I made the contact. And they get them from the publisher.
And it's
All right?
got to be in their system.
Right.
I guess
Yeah, that's one of the things for a small publisher is that, because like Melanie and I had this discussion 6 weeks ago, maybe, she said, hey, I saw your book on Ingram Spark, which is where the library gets their books from, right? All right. So, you have to be your own publicist and marketer, and it can be exhausting. So I'm going to tell you a couple of success stories, okay? I got 3 newspapers to do stories on me and the book. All right? So that's a success, even though they're small papers. And I had to craft a pitch letter to them, which is very similar to a query letter for an agent. Why should we care about this book? Why should we care about you, right? For my hometown paper, the Enterprise Ledger, my pitch was, hey, it's Local Boy Made Good, right? Hey, I have a book that's like a legit book. It's coming out on this date, May 27th. Please, could you do a story on me? Because I actually still have relatives and friends who live in the area that you cover. So, approaching with that and doing it in a professional manner, right, definitely helped. I also got wrestling websites like Slam Wrestling, did a huge story. Pro Wrestling Stories did a huge story. Trying to think, somebody else. So essentially, I went in with kind of a marketing plan, because that's communications is part of what I do. So I went in with this plan to, I'm going to target these newspapers, I'm going to target these websites, I'm going to target these TV shows, and I'm going to do my best to get on there and to get people to interview me and to plug my book at every opportunity. Okay?
Somebody at Talk Radio here in Birmingham.
Yeah, I actually, and radio is one of the things, because, so I have a little bit of background in TV and I have a little bit of background in newspapers, right? I have a much stronger background in newspapers. I probably concentrate on websites, newspapers, and TV more than I do radio. I actually need to contact the Birmingham Mountain Radio guys. I think that's right. Birmingham? No, go ahead. Birmingham Mountain Radio? I think that's right. So, because they will do stuff on writers. And I need to contact the NPR folks here in Birmingham as well. So, now, you have to set up your own book signings. So I told you about my wins, right? That my publisher's super happy with and super impressed that this book has gotten as much reception as it has. All right? Also, another big thing was, I approached the Hoover Public Library and said, hey, I'd love to do a talk about publishing and blah, 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 right? So, and here we are. I've talked about wins. Let's talk about losses. Because I want to be real with you, okay? When you set up your book signings, they can go good or bad. And I'm not going to focus on the good one that I had. I want to talk about the bad one, which was a week ago in Trussville, all right? I sat at Dee Dee's Book Rack for 2 hours last Saturday afternoon. And the woman who runs it's fantastic, and it's a great bookstore, a great used bookstore. I sat there for 2 hours and sold 3 books. Okay? I'm glad I sold those books. But it was tough to sit there for 2 hours and smile and be welcoming to everybody that walked by and sell 3 books in 2 hours. That was hard. And that was an absolute blow to my ego, okay? Here's another thing, and again, I'm keeping it 100, so I'm gonna sound like I'm really complaining. Remember that when I am complaining, I've sold more books right now than I ever dreamed of selling, okay? And I'm really, really happy with the results of what has gone on. So, yesterday, I have weaseled my way onto Talk of Alabama for ABC 3340, all right? Without making any kind of political statement about the Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court's decision yesterday broke during Talk of Alabama. I'm a news person. I understood that that was way more important than the local guy with a book, right? However, my interview yesterday was to pump this meeting and the signing later today at 2nd Charles. It's really important to me, right? So, of course, it happened 5 minutes before I was supposed to go on the air. I was supposed to be on at like 9:30, or just right before 9:30. I think it was 9:21, right after their commercial break at the bottom of the hour. And dang it, y'all, the Supreme Court news broke. And I'm just there and I'm like, look, I'm a news guy. I understand it takes precedence over me. So what they said was, hey, we'll record it and we'll play it later and we'll put it up on the website. They still hadn't put that thing up on the website. And so, you know, I'm kind of like, oh. And then yesterday, I really am going, but I want you to understand the vagaries of doing your own publicity, doing your own signings, all of that stuff, okay? Then yesterday, I go to 2nd and Charles, where I had sent them last week some flyers for the signing, right? You know, they said, yeah, we'll put these up. So I go last night just to make sure that they've got books, they've got, you know, the flyers up and everything. Guys, I go to 2nd and Charles, and there ain't a flyer up. Nowhere in the store. So politely, and this is always key when you're upset about something. Politely, I got a manager and said, hey, I know that you guys got these. You gave me a heads up that you had received my email and that they look good. So where are the flyers for my talk here, or for my signing here tomorrow? And the manager on duty said, oh, we're going to put them up in the morning, first thing. And I was just like, advanced publicity, okay. You know, because at that point, does it do me any good to yell at a manager who's just there and going to do what his GM says anyway? Does me absolutely no good, and I don't want to lose the goodwill of the salespeople at the bookstore, right? So stuff like that happens. But then you also have stuff like, hey guys, I have 20 more copies of this book than I expected. I will email, or I will snail mail you a copy, a signed copy, if you'll send me your address and if you'll prepay me for, through Venmo or PayPal or Cash App or whatever. And you put it on Twitter and those books are gone in 2 days. You know, I mean, stuff like that's really cool. So, all right. So we've touched on this, and I keep bringing it up because I do consider myself a professional writer, and if you are a professional writer, you get paid. All right? What do you do for a living? Hmm?
I'm a therapist in private practice and a
Okay. Do you do therapy for free? Yeah, right? So, I mean, if I asked you what you do for your job, what you do for your work, you would not tell me that you did it for free, right? So the money part is important, okay? So what kind of money can you expect if you go with a small or micro publisher? The biggest advance that I've heard of Intrigue, which is the house that I pointed out, giving someone was $1,000. And that was for Sean Cosby's My Darkest Prayer. All right? Harlequin does like $5,000 a book, and they are a independent press. They are a larger independent press. So, Shotgun Honey, you'll have to find out on your own if you do them. But I can tell you this: it didn't take selling many copies to earn out for me, right? You are looking at, say, $1,000, $750, $500, sometimes nothing. Okay? That's just the reality of working with a small or micro publisher. All right? And here is the question that a lot of people will ask me is, if I can publish it on my own on Amazon, what's the benefit? Well, we kind of went through some of those earlier, right? You have definite benefits to working with a publisher. Quite frankly, you'll get a more professional product. And people won't come up to you on the street and go, you had like 50 typos in that book that you published on Amazon, right? So, or if they do, you have something to yell at your publisher about because they're not doing their job, right? So you do have, however, and I alluded to this earlier, smaller distribution than with a Big Five publisher, where a Big Five publisher can have a salesperson call or go by and say, hey, we have a hot new author who's going to take publishing by storm. We expect, they're getting reviewed in the New York Times. Publishers Weekly has given them a starred review. Kirkus has given them a starred review. That kind of thing, right? Okay, Barnes & Noble or Second & Charles might bring in 20 books, all right? Or 50, or, if they feel like the demand is there, right? I'm lucky to get a couple of books into a brick and mortar bookstore. And I work on it on my own. All right? It's hard work. It's getting told no a lot. But in publishing, and I haven't looked at the time. How are we doing on time, Melanie? We're good? Okay, good. In publishing, everything is hard work. It's not magic. You will not find a magic bullet to skip steps. You just won't. You have to do the work. All right, even though the wait time is shorter, it is not the immediate rush of self-publishing, okay? I'll give you a couple of examples. Like it was nearly a year from acceptance to publication for Living the Gimmick, all right? It was because of all the goofy stuff that went down with Magic City Blues. It will be 2 years until that book is published from the first time that it was accepted, okay? That's short time, guys. I sold a short story to a magazine called Rockin' a Hard Place, which is one of the top noir magazines in the country. The story is called Negative Tilt, and I sold it, I think, in January or February of last year, and it was published in November. All right? So when you are dealing with legitimate publishers, you are going to have a long lead time. I sold a story this past February to Reckon Review, which is a southern literary review based out of North Carolina. Pat, that does count as the South. But I sold that in February. It's not going to appear until next month. All right, and it's called The Ghost of Buxahatchee Creek, and some of y'all may have heard me read part of it here. And a lot of it comes down to this: you lack the same size support network than with a big five. At a small publisher, the person who creates your book cover may be the same person who's doing the copy editing on your book. The same person who is responsible for getting review copies, what they call ARCs, advanced reader copies, okay? The same person who's responsible for getting your ARCs out may be doing the social media for the publisher, right? It is all concentrated and everybody's wearing multiple hats. Whereas if you go to a big five publisher, hey, we got one guy who's making X amount of, or one guy, I say, probably one overworked woman who is doing just all of the social media for 20 different titles, right? Does that make sense? So you have, as opposed to having a dedicated staff to doing X, you have people who wear multiple hats, and sometimes it wears people out. Sometimes stuff gets overlooked, and as an author, what you have to do is to try to keep on top of the stuff that you know has to be done for your book. Because one of the things that I have learned is super, super important, and this may be the truest. I have told you a lot of truths, I think, today about publishing. This may be the biggest truth I tell you. Nobody is going to care about your book the way that you care about your book. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, let's go to the video. Okay, where do we go from here? Whichever way you choose, you're in for some rejection. Just the name of the game, I'm sad to say. Okay, when we talk about rejection, all right, in Melanie's fantastic introduction, she pointed out that I have sold and had published 25 different short stories over the last 2 years. That is a really good run, all right? I have probably had 200 rejections, all right? The no's are a lot more than the yeses. That's how this business is. You hear no a lot more than you hear yes. And you have to thicken up your skin, take that no, and go find somebody who will say yes. All right? So, free resources to use, and I'm going to be really basic here, okay? William Shunn's story formatting. If you don't know what that is, okay? That is the accepted format for every publishing house. All right? Every publishing house uses that story or novel formatting. All right? And that link right there is a step-by-step guide to it. Okay? All right. And again, this is basic stuff. This is, and I hesitated to talk about how, to decide how basic, but I don't know where everybody is on their publishing journey. All right? So, how to write a query letter. JaneFriedman.com, query letters. Go there, look and see what she does. Okay? It's really good stuff. If you are at the point where you are looking for a literary agent, querytracker.net will help you, number one, keep track of where your queries go. It's right in the name. But they also have a search function for you to find agents who work in the field that you write. Okay? Super, super helpful resource. Then to sharpen your query letter, because you will not get it right the first time. All right? You won't. Query letters are like short stories. you will write them, and then you will need to rewrite them.
Like a cover letter for.
Right, like a cover letter, exactly. It's like a cover letter for your book. To sharpen your query letter, querysharp.blogspot.com. That is literary agent Janet Reed's blog. And she pulls no punches. She is very, very blunt. Okay? So, and for somebody like me, I do real well with blunt. I'm super straightforward. All right? I want you guys to look at those resources right there, because those are all huge things, and they start from just basic stuff like the William Shun's manuscript formatting. Okay? Like, some people don't know that you should double space your manuscript. They don't know that you should have your name and your manuscript title and your page number at the top right of every page except the front page of your manuscript. Stuff like that. Okay? Like, it's basic, but if you don't know it, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, because when your stuff comes through and you don't know stuff about how to properly format your manuscript, they will immediately take you less seriously. Okay? All right. Let's go next. Oh no. All right, I'm opening myself up for this. The Q&A, if you have questions for me, if there's something that I have not touched on. All right, I saw you first. Yes, sir.
How many pages are your short stories?
It really depends. I don't think about page count when I write a short story. Most places, unless they note otherwise, want something about 5,000 words or less. So mine generally come around 3,000 to 4,000 words. So that, which can be anywhere from 12 to 16 pages, I think, is about right. Yes, sir.
If I thought that I could really do it, and I walked into this shop like they talked to me, if they didn't know who I was at all.
They'd probably prefer you email them.
Where? Are they geographically here?
No, they are actually based in West Virginia, in Wheeling, West Virginia.
Okay.
So,
Do you pay an agent, or do they just take some of your work?
so this is a great question, and I'm going to give you a roundabout answer because I want to caution some people about some stuff. Okay.
Do you,
Question is, I'll get it where everybody can hear it. Okay. So, do you pay an agent, or do they take a fee out of what you do, or out of your contract? Okay. So, I'm going to start by talking about publishers first. Okay? Any publisher that asks you for money up front, that asks you to pay them money to publish your book, I can't cuss, can I? We're in a public place. Is a freaking scam run the other way. Okay? Anybody who asks you for money to publish your work is a scam. Period. End of story. Okay? Agents will not ask you reputable, I can pronounce words, it's my game. Reputable agents will not ask you for money straight up. One of the things that to do, I don't have this up here anymore, with Query Tracker, one of the things to look for is whether these agents are a member of AAR, the Association of Authors Representatives. Okay? AAR is a great organization because they, when an agent signs on as a part of that organization, they agree to the terms of ethics for that organization. One of those terms is that they do not charge reading fees. And again, people want your money, right? I mean, that's just the way. Like, if you guys come to the signing later today, I will sell you a book. I promise, I will sell you a book. But here's the thing, all right? If an agency asks for a reading fee, that is an unethical thing in today's world. Okay, I'll give you a great story about this. The Scott Meredith Literary Agency back in the day employed two of my favorite authors, Donald Westlake and Lawrence Block, as fee readers. All right, they would run ads in writers' magazines and say, top agent, Scott Meredith. And he really was a respected and capable literary agent. Top literary agent Scott Meredith wants to see your work. All you have to do is send him $5 and a copy of your stuff, right? So the way that the fee readers made their money was to reject your story and say, listen, it's not your fault, you're a great writer, but you have holes in your story, the plot's wrong, blah, 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 right? It's not the writing, it is the plot skeleton that you have, all right? That's the issue. Fix this and send it back to us with another $5 so that we can, and that is an ongoing scam. Like if you Google Publish America, all right, this is a scam publishing company that built people for thousands of dollars. Any agent or publisher who asks you for money up front, run. Okay? Pardon me. I will give you an example. What you'll get from a reputable agent, and the reason I know this is because I've researched it and I have friends who are much more successful than me. You will get a statement from your agent, because what will happen is if you have an agent, your publisher deals with the money with the agent. Your agent will send you a statement of, this is the money that your publisher paid you minus our expenses. Here's what we took out. Here's the remainder of that money. Okay? That makes sense? That was like a really long-winded way of answering that question, but I felt like I needed the details.
And those magazines do require some reading people.
No. Here is one exception. So most magazines, and I'll pick on you, Walt, because you sent me a story for the anthology, which I haven't read yet. I'm not reading until the end of the reading period, or until the end of the submission period. So when you send in a story to a magazine, they should not ask you for a reading fee. All right? Here are the exceptions to that. Okay? And they will say it up front. If you are trying to publish in a magazine like the Harvard Review, all right? If you are trying to publish in like an academic journal that deals with fiction, then you have they will ask for money up front. Like I think Harvard Review they ask for $3 as a reading fee. All right? And I know this because I've submitted to them. That's like stuff like that is the exception. That is the exception to the rule. If they are a small literary journal that is well respected, that you know. But like, look, the Paris Review doesn't ask for any kind of reading fee. The New Yorker doesn't ask for any kind of reading fee. So, and these are people who could probably make a killing from as many submissions as they get, because I think Paris Review gets 1,200 submissions a month. Think about that. All right. So, and I've submitted stuff to Paris Review, and I've submitted stuff to the New Yorker. I've published a book, y'all. Possibly my proudest moment prior to that, literarily, was getting to a personalized rejection from the New Yorker. So, I mean, you have to be aware and be wary when you're sending stuff. Like, my general rule is I don't send anybody any money, with a couple of notable exceptions if I believe in what they're doing, or if they are like the Harvard Review or Sewanee Review, like they do that to pay their editorial kids a stipend, right? If I know why that's there, okay, cool. But if it's like an established magazine that's a for-profit magazine, mm-mm. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions.
All right.
Are there any other resources besides that website you find business small?
Yes, Writer's Market. Writer's Market still exists in printed format. Publishers Weekly, no, that's not what I'm thinking of. I'm sorry. Publishers Marketplace as well, which the Hoover Public Library probably has either a subscription to their online magazine that you could access from here, or they may have a hard copy as well. So, Writer's Market's on sale, at pretty much any bookstore that carries first-run books.
Another question is successful novels, big names, medium names, whatever, sometimes have a series of very successful books, and maybe have a couple of flops, and maybe like have to do sales again.
It really depends. The question is about, successful novelists, do they peak and then maybe drop down and have a flop, as you said, and then rebound? It really depends. I'll give you a couple of examples. I will start with my buddy Sean Cosby. So Sean started at Intrigue with My Darkest Prayer, all right? And it was an ebook, and it sold pretty well. But his next book was called Blacktop Wasteland, and it sold really, really well. Won the LA Times Book Award. Won International Thriller Writers Award for Best Hardback Novel, which his next book, Razorblade Tears, which is what is out now, repeated that success, right? So, and Sean's really hot right now, and he is always worried that his next book is going to drop off. There are people who have really successful books like, and I'm stalling here, I'm vamping while I'm thinking about examples in the back of my head. Cold Mountain, great example. I was actually going to go for my standby of Robert B. Parker, who, if you remember the TV show Spencer for Hire, back in the 1980s. So he published several books that were successful enough to get a television series made, which is a huge success, right? The books, however, peaked probably with Small Vices, all right? And then dropped off in quality, all right? And never really recovered until his death. And then a guy named Ace Atkins, who is a Mississippi writer, who actually is a former Auburn football player, started writing those books again, and they started selling again. So, sometimes it's just you hit big and you drop down. Cold Mountain's a great example. I would also say, let me give you an example of somebody that I think of as a successful novelist, but I've never read any of his books. Stuart Woods manages to get every book that he writes published. I've never read it. I don't know anybody who reads it. Pat, you might, I don't know. But I don't know anybody who reads them, and I never see him on the bestseller list, right? But his novels are apparently really successful. And maybe I'm just not the audience for it, but his stuff is at least successful enough and has been a steady line because he keeps getting published, keeps getting advances. Yes, sir?
What kind of money do they pay for short stories?
Whew, it depends. The most I have made off of a short story was $350. So, but that was a national magazine. I can tell you that an online magazine like Tough, which is crime, noir, and Gritlit online magazine, pays $50 for a short story. All right. Who is it? And you're talking about if it's a good magazine, they pay pro rates, which is usually 50 cents to $1 a word. All right. So I haven't hit that marker yet. Most of the stories that I sell, $75, $125. You know, I got the Outlier who's at $350, right? Which is a story that I'm still amazed got bought. And that story is A Good Night's Sleep, and it is collected into a British collection called Crimacopia. We're all animals under the skin. So, and I don't make any more money off of that either. So if you find that book and you want to buy it, I've already been paid for my submission.
In general, if you sell a short story or one of your books to Shotgun Hunting, do you give up all rights, styles, and privileges to it later?
No. And this is one of the reasons too, when you get a contract, if you want to run it by an agent, like one of the things is that like, my contract with Shotgun Honey is that for 5 years they have exclusive rights to publish my book in electronic and paper and trade paperback format. All right. So if somebody
wants to make a movie out of it.
Yeah, somebody that's
They pay him.
me. So, and that's you have to read your contract carefully. I can't speak for like every publisher clearly because I have right now Shotgun Honey's my home. I love it there. I'm happy. I go tra-la-la all day every day. But you have to read your contract.
You may have just answered this, but what is the life expectancy of your book?
Of my book?
How long will it sell?
Okay, so I'm under contract for this book with Shotgun Honey for 5 years. They have an option to renew after 5 years. If they don't take that option, I could shop this book as a reprint to someone else. I'll give you, I feel like I'm picking on him, I'll give you an example from Sean. His first book was an ebook exclusive, I believe ebook exclusive, to Intrigue, right? It's called My Darkest Prayer. And Flatiron, his agent finally finagled the rights to the book away from Intrigue because Sean was their biggest seller ever, all right? And especially after he hit big with Blacktop Wasteland and then with Razorblade Tears, Intrigue was holding on to that book because that's the first book in his catalog, right? So eventually, Josh Getzler, who is Sean's agent, got the rights to the book away from Intrigue and sold them to Flatiron. And now a hardback edition of My Darkest Prayer is coming out next year or later this year, one of the two, because they have those rights back, or because Sean eventually got the rights back to it through his agent. So once my contract with Shotgun Honey runs out, I am hoping that by that point I will be a big enough deal that we can do something similar. But who knows? If not, I'll be happy to re-up with Shotgun Honey for another 5 years. So that's the kind of lifespan of the contract. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Your friend that you were just talking about, his first book didn't do well, then went on to do well.
Mm-hmm.
So he can republish his first book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when he republished his first book, will there be rewrites? Like, well, let's make this change.
Yes.
Do you
Yes,
rewrite?
that's actually one of the things that he wanted to do. Sean's a perfectionist. and I think that in some ways most writers are, like, you release a book out into the wild and you want to, you know, occasionally take another whack at it. I've got a passage in Living the Gimmick that I'm kind of like, oh, I should have done this in that instance. You know what I mean? And so Sean has written an introduction for it, plus he has cleaned up some of the places that he feels like needed to be cleaned up and deepened the narrative a little bit. Like, Sean's such a great writer. And the fact that he is an African-American writer writing about the Deep South is a perspective that doesn't get a whole lot. You know, I mean, he's doing something that is very new because he's writing commercial fiction about the Deep South from an African-American man's perspective. You don't see that a lot, you know. I said this, I was on a podcast, and what I said about Sean is he has essentially shouldered his way to the front of American letters, right? And deserves every bit of it. Tremendous writer, but yeah, he'll be able to deepen that book before it is re-released. And the nice thing is, and I hate to go on about money, I believe he got another good advance for this book. So he's gotten, you know, he got whatever he got from Intrigue, and then he got an advance from Flatiron as well for this new version of the book. Yes, ma'am.
When you like had already finished your project and you were like sending it to people to like read and stuff like that, did you care more what authors said or did you care more what just regular people said?
So it's a great question. I didn't care what anybody said. I knew I had a good book. I mean, and that's honestly fairly true. I knew that I had something. You know what I mean? I sent it to people for different reasons. All right. I sent it to a friend of mine named Beth Whalen because she's not a pro wrestling fan, and I knew that if I had pro wrestling content in there that was not understandable or not relatable, that she would not finish the book. And I'm good enough friends with her that she would tell me. Like, she's an experienced reader, she loves books, and if I had done something that wasn't relatable, she would tell me, okay? So I did not send it to, I sent it to other authors that I knew wrote crime, all right? Because this is a crime novel, but it's also not just a crime novel. It's also, there's also a murder mystery at the center of it, all right? Like, one of the things that was super important to me was, does whodunit make sense, right? Does that flow all the way through the book? Does it make sense when the reveal comes? That's what I wanted the mystery writers to think, right? Or to be thinking about as they read it. So a guy named James, well, his pen name is James D.F. Hanna, and he's a Shamus Award-winning detective novelist, and he was really helpful with that. A guy named Christopher Swan, I sent it to him specifically because he is a Southern writer, and a lot of, I mean, the action in the book, in the modern day, takes place at Balboa Victoria here in Birmingham, right? I wanted to make sure that, like, I'm getting the Southern flavor in there. Does that make sense? So I really had specific ideas for each person that I sent it to. Like, I want to know this. And when I asked if I could send it to them, I asked specifically, hey, I want you to read for this, right? I'm a good enough writer, like a clean enough writer. I don't do a lot of typos. I don't, you know, and I'm a pretty good editor as well. So I wasn't really looking for somebody to tell me, hey, you have an unclosed parenthesis somewhere in here, you know. If they told me that, I'm taking it and using it. But that wasn't what I sent it for, because I knew that also whoever copy edited the book would be looking for that as well. And I think they missed one thing in the whole book. So I can't be too mad about that. All right, anybody else got a question? Because I want to turn it around. I know one of the things we said was, hey, talk to me about what you're working on so that we can talk about how to pitch that to somebody. So if anybody else has a question, how are we on time?
We've got about 20 minutes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was gonna say if you guys want to take a break or a bathroom break or anything, but why don't we go straight into that, okay? And to do that, I'm going to actually put the microphone down. And I just want to come out here and we'll talk, okay?